Welcome to WHMIS 2015. When you complete this training, you should be able to apply knowledge of Workplace Hazards Information System in your workplace, describe the different requirements for supplier and workplace labels, find information on safety data sheets to use the product safely in your work area, explain the health and safety risks you may encounter, identify the WHMIS pictograms and the precautions to take when handling the product or material, describe your rights and responsibilities as they relate to WHMIS. WHMIS is the Workplace Hazardous Material Information System. Canada has aligned WHMIS with a globally harmonized system of classification and labeling of chemicals, GHS. GHS was developed by the United Nations to establish globally a common set of rules for classifying hazardous products, labels, and a standard format for safety data sheets, formerly known as material safety data sheets. GHS does not replace WHMIS. The purpose of WHMIS is to protect the health and safety of everyone who works with or near hazardous workplace materials. WHMIS is enforced by the Labour Branch of Human Resources Development Canada or federal workplaces and by the provincial or territorial agencies responsible for occupation health and safety for most all workplaces. A hazard product is a name given to a product, material, or substance that is capable of posing significant risk to health, safety, and property. The products are regulated by WHMIS 2015 legislation and fall into one or more hazard classifications, each uniquely identified by the pictogram for quick recognition. WHMIS is divided into three categories: labels, supplier and workplace labels, safety data sheets, SDSs, and worker education. The supplier label has the product identifier, hazard statements, precautionary statements including first aid measures, hazard pictograms, signal words, danger or warning, supplier information. Danger warnings are used to emphasize hazards and indicate the severity of the hazard. When seeking medical attention, take the safety data sheet with you. Pictograms, signal words, and hazard statements must be grouped together on the label. Easy to read and durable. Bilingual in English and French. Note that the hash border previously used on WHMIS 1998 supplier labels will no longer be required. Workplace labels are required when the hazard material is produced, the supplier label becomes illegible or accidentally removed, the product is transferred from one supplier container to another. Label information includes product identifier, safe handling precautions, reference to the SDS. Personal protective equipment, PPE, refers to protective clothing, helmets, goggles, or other garments or equipment designed to protect the wearer from injury. The hazards addressed by protective equipment include physical, electrical, heat, chemical, biohazard, and airborne particulate matter. Protective clothing is applied to additional categories of clothing, and protective gear applies to items such as pads, guards, shields, masks, and others. The purpose of personal protective equipment is to reduce worker exposure to hazards. When engineering and administrative controls are not feasible or effective to reduce these risks to acceptable levels, PPE is needed when there are hazards present. There are 16 sections in a SDS and must be in a set order. Section 1, Identification. Section 2, Hazard Identification. Section 3, Composition information on ingredients. Section 4, First aid measures. Section 5, Firefighting measures. Section 6, Accidental release measures. Section 7, Handling and storage. Section 8, Exposure controls and personal protection. Section 9, Physical and chemical properties. Section 10, Stability and reactivity. Section 11, Toxicological information. Section 12, Ecological information. Section 13, Disposal considerations. Section 14, Transport information. Section 15, Regulatory information. Section 16, Other information. Hazardous products can be harmful to your health if you do not limit your exposure to them. A health hazard is the ability of a chemical to affect your health quickly, like a burn, or over a long period of time, like cancer. Some chemical products can cause immediate harm, called acute effects. For example, sulfuric acid will burn your skin or eyes. Long-term effects are chemicals that take longer to do their damage. The effects are called chronic. It may take hours, days, years, or even decades before you are aware of any problems. A physical hazard is a sudden reaction such as a fire, explosion, or corrosion. Physical hazards are controlled by handling chemicals properly. The ways to control exposure to hazardous materials are at the source, along the way, at the worker. When a material is listed as a hazardous product, the manufacturer must treat the product according to WHMIS regulations. Part of this regulation is to classify it according to hazard class. The hazard class and category are a guide to the type of hazard, degree of hazard, precautions to follow. The hazard pictogram that appears on the supplier label and SES is very important. It provides you with the information about the primary hazard posed by a product. It also indicates whether the product is dangerous to touch or breathe, is easy combustible, unstable, or reacts negatively when mixed with other products. Look for a pictogram that is framed by a red square set on a point. The exception is the biohazard pictogram, which is in a round black border. The flammable pictogram identifies flammable gases, Category 1, flammable aerosols, Category 1 and 2, flammable liquids, Category 1, 2, and 3, and flammable solids, Category 1 and 2. Pyrophoric liquids, solids, and gases, Category 1, self-heating substances and mixtures, Category 2. Substances and mixtures in contact with water emit flammable explosive gases, Category 1, 2, and 3. Self-reactive substances and mixtures, types B, C, D, E, and F. Organic peroxides, type B, C, D, E, and F. Examples of flammables that may be at work and at home include gasoline, propane, butane, and paint thinner. Precautions for flammable materials: keep away from heat, hot surfaces, sparks, open flames, and other ignition sources. Wear protective gloves, protective clothing, eye protection, and face protection. Work in well-ventilated areas. Store properly in designated areas. The oxidizer symbol identifies oxidizing gases, Category 1, oxidizing liquids, Category 1, 2, and 3, oxidizing solids, Category 1, 2, and 3. Examples of oxidizers that might be found at the work and at home include hydrogen peroxide, chlorine, and sodium chlorate. Oxidizer precautions include: keep away from heat, hot surfaces, sparks, open flames, and other ignition sources. Wear protective goggles, eye protection, and face protection. Store in proper containers which will not rust or oxidize. The compressed gas pictogram identifies gas under pressure. Examples of gas under pressure that may be found at work and at home include oxygen, propane, acetylene, and compressed air. Compressed gas precautions include: handle cylinders with care, do not drop them. Keep cylinders away from direct heat like furnaces or open flames. Store cylinders in areas designated by your supervisor. Must be well ventilated and dry. The corrosive pictogram identifies corrosives to metals, Category 1. Examples of corrosives that may be found at work and at home include battery acid, nitric acid, hydrochloric acid, and hydroxide solutions. Corrosive precautions include: keep containers tightly closed, handle material only when using appropriate protective clothing, handle material in well-ventilated areas, and wear proper respiratory equipment. The explosive pictogram identifies self-reactive substances and mixtures, type A and B. Organic peroxides, type A and B. Examples of explosives that may be found at work include a wide variety of chemicals which can explode under certain conditions: shock, pressure or high temperature. A small number are manufactured especially for the purpose of being used as explosives. Explosive precautions include keep the material away from incompatible materials and store in areas designated by your supervisor. Keep the material away from sources of ignition. Wear the proper protective equipment and clothing, including eye, face, and hand protection. Other physical hazards include combustible dusts, simple asphyxiants, physical hazards not otherwise classified. This class is meant to cover any physical hazards that are not covered in any other physical hazard class. If a product is classified in this class, the hazard statement on the label and STS will describe the nature of the hazard. The health hazard pictogram identifies respiratory and skin sensitivity, category 1, 1A, and 1B. Germ cell mutagenicity, category 1, 1A, 1B, and 2. Carcinogenicity, category 1, 1A, 1B, and 2. Reproduction toxicity, category 1, 1A, 1B, and 2. Specific target organ toxicity, single exposure, category 1 and 2. Specific target organ toxicity, repeated exposure, category 1 and 2. Aspiration hazard, category 1. Health hazard precautions include avoid breathing dust or vapors, avoid contact with skin or eyes, work in well-ventilated areas, wear appropriate personal protection, store products in designated areas. Other health hazards include health hazards not otherwise classified. This class covers products that are not included in any other health hazard class. If a product is classified in this class, the hazard statement will describe the nature of the hazard. The toxic symbol, skull and crossbones, identify acute toxic oral category 1, 2, and 3, dermal category 1, 2, and 3, and inhalation category 1, 2, and 3. Acute toxicity refers to effects occurring following skin contact or ingestion exposure to a single dose, or multiple doses given over 24 hours, or an inhalation exposure of 4 hours. Toxic precautions include avoid breathing dust or vapors, avoid contact with skin or eyes, work in well-ventilated areas, wear appropriate personal protection, store products in designated areas. The irritant pictogram identifies acute toxicity, oral, dermal, and inhalation, category 4. Skin corrosion and irritation, category 2. Serious eye damage and irritation, category 2 and 2A. Respiratory and skin sensitivity, category 1, 1A, and 1B. Specific target organ toxicity, repeated exposure, category 3. Irritant precautions include avoid contact with skin or eyes, work in well-ventilated areas, wear appropriate personal protection, store products in designated areas. The biohazardous infectious materials spectrogram identifies biohazardous infectious materials, category 1. These materials may cause disease in humans and animals, such as viruses, bacteria, and fungi. They may also include cultures and diagnostic specimens such as blood, urine, and body tissue. Did you notice the pictogram? It is the only pictogram with a round black border. All others are framed in a red square set on a point. Biohazardous infectious material precautions include avoid contamination by wearing protective equipment. Handle material only when fully protected by the proper designated equipment. Handle material in designated areas that are approved by your supervisor. The environmental pictogram that has the dead tree and dead fish symbols are hazardous to the aquatic environment and hazardous to the ozone layer. GHS also identifies an environmental hazards group. This group and its classes was not adopted by Canada in WHMIS 2015. However, you may see the environmental classes listed on labels and STSs, especially for products imported from other countries. Many products are made and packaged as household or consumer products. and their labeling is slightly different. Because household products often get used in their workplace, it is important to be familiar with these hazard symbols as well. Just because they are made for household use does not make these products any safer. Examples of consumer products include drain cleaner, window cleaner, cleansers, and disinfectants. Did you know that mixing hazardous products can be deadly? For example, mixing common household chemicals such as bleach and ammonia will release toxic vapors that can attack your eyes and mucous membrane. But the biggest threat comes from inhaling the gases. If you find someone who you think has mixed bleach and ammonia, if possible, remove the person to fresh air, preferably outdoors, and call 911 for emergency assistance. Rights under WHMIS. Workers. Know about any hazards that you and your co-workers could be exposed to in the workplace. Refuse work that is unsafe. Consult with your workplace joint and health and safety committee or health and safety representative. Duties of a worker. Participate in training. Apply knowledge and training. Report damage, illegible or missing labels or SDSs to your supervisor. Duties of the employer. Implement the WHMIS program. Maintain and make available safety data sheets. Train workers. Maintain a chemical inventory of all hazardous materials in the workplace. Duties of a supplier. Classify products, hazardous or non-hazardous. Apply supplier labels. Provide safety data sheets for hazardous products. Update SDSs when new information becomes available. The key is to think before you act. Stop and consider what materials you are working with. What hazardous materials are present in the workplace. Read the WHMIS labels on these products and their SDSs. Know the potential dangers. Understand how to use these materials to minimize risk. How to clean up these products. How to apply first aid. Don't hesitate to ask your supervisor if you have questions. There are far too many potentially hazardous materials and processes in the workplace to cover all of them in this session. Be aware of what chemicals are in use in your workplace, in your work area, and know how they are used. Be sure to know the potential hazard of the products you handle and how to protect yourself. This is the end of this presentation. Now continue this course by watching the video.